Hi everyone. Welcome once again to the Great Place to Work Diversity and Inclusion Summit 2020. My name is Maithili and I will be your host for this inclusion dialogue. So thank you so much for joining us in this session. I've always had a minor reservation with the word include. It's always given me a sense that there is a primary owner of the world who has created a structure, and now other groups will have to be allowed to access this structure to be included. While in theory we would argue that the world is for everyone, the reality is very complex, and we're aware of that. This month on September 6th, we celebrated the second anniversary of the historical judgment on Section 377. And however, as much as it was celebrated, we do wonder if this law has been a key enabler, and what can we do to further this support for the community. To expand on this idea, we have two extremely discerning speakers today to share their views on a topic that warrants more space in workplace conversations. Credibility, care, and career for the LGBTIQA+ community in the workplace, and how do we build an ecosystem that stands stronger than the law? And there have been several judgments in the past, and the idea is to also reflect on what has been since. And our first speaker, and I'm extremely honored to introduce my first speaker, Mr. Parmesh Shahani. Parmesh is the Vice President at Godrej Industries Limited and the founder of the Godrej India Culture Lab. A member of the FICCI Task Force on Diversity, he is a passionate advocate for LGBTQ inclusion in corporate India and has guided many of the country's leading companies on their inclusion journeys. His first book, Gay Bombay, Globalization, Love and Belonging in Contemporary India, was released in 2008 and re-released in June 2020 as an updated edition. And his second book, which I'm very excited to pick up, Queeristan, LGBTQ Inclusion in the Indian Workplace, has just been released in August. Before I invite Parmesh to share his views on this topic, he wants us to look at a video, and he'll play that for us before he shares his insights. Over to you, Parmesh.
Thanks, Maithili, for that. Each time I see that video, I'm really very moved. Gauri is one of the people in the book, Queeristan, and I actually wrote the book to showcase her story and the story of so many of India's LGBTQ champions who are all in their own ways, whether in the corporate world or not, trying to make this world more LGBTQ inclusive. I myself have been in the LGBTQ inclusion space, working at Godrej, taking Godrej on our own journey and also helping so many other companies go on their own journey as well. It's an absolute pleasure. I actually want to start this session by reading out a little blurb that Prasanjit actually wrote for the book. And I want to read it right from the beginning of the book because I'm just so grateful to you, Prasanjit, and everyone at Great Place to Work Institute. And this is what Prasanjit wrote. As I read the book, are we creating an inclusive country as visualized by Ambedkar and Gandhi? Are organizations that are quoted in this book the torchbearers to a brighter future? At a personal level, it is about realizing your human potential, regardless of your gender identity. You can use this book as a manual to create an inclusive organizational culture. However, the chances are it will also grip you at a personal level. I loved reading it. Thank you, Prasanjit. Companies are not homophobic per se, but companies are often ignorant. And one of the reasons is that very few people come up and ask for the kind of change that they want. So with Godrej, my own journey some years ago began when I joined Godrej as an out and proud gay person. I went to my boss, Nisa Godrej, and Sumit, who heads corporate HR. And I said, as an LGBTQ person, I want to know our policies, benefits, etc. at Godrej. And we looked at our HR policies and realized that this was not something that we had worked on. So at the end of that day itself, Godrej started its own journey. We changed our anti-discrimination policy that very day. And over the years have moved on to offering so many other progressive policies, whether it's same-sex partnership benefits, whether all the way up to a gender affirmation surgery that we offer anyone who happens to be anyone who happens to be trans and wishes to transition while at the workplace, including annual benefits for hormone therapy and so on. So it's been a 9-year journey in which we've gone on this path towards LGBTQ inclusion, but it all began with that first conversation of just speaking up and asking. And all of you who are watching this, often it's a question of go to your own organization and just ask, right? Say, what are our policies? What are our benefits? And you might find to your surprise that if you don't have it, you have willing bosses or colleagues who want to create this for you if you just ask for it, right? And why it's so important for parents to embrace the LGBTQ children and love them and accept them by giving so many examples from real life, like that of Ghazal Dhaliwal, whose family very publicly embraced her on Satyamev Jayate with Amir Khan some years ago, all the way to cinematic embracing, which is what happened in Shubh Mangal Jada Savdhan or Ek Ladki Ko Dekha. So much of the media right now is about parents accepting. But I talk about how organizations, your workplace has to act in loco parentis, and we have to accept our queer employees. I make a business case for why LGBTQ inclusion is so important. And it's 4 broad pillars. One is it makes an organization more money. To give you a sense, the LGBTQ economy is about $5 trillion worldwide. And in India itself, it's been estimated that the LGBTQ market is about $200 billion. And the World Bank did a study some years ago measuring the cost of homophobia. Lee Badgett, the economist who did the study, who's a professor at UMass Amherst, has gone on record to say that her estimate of $32 billion is conservative. So $32 billion in the year that she did the study was about 1% of the GDP. So if we take away homophobia, we can have a GDP bump of about 1%, right? So actually, let me read out this bit from the book that talks about innovation. And this is my boss, Nisa Godrej, at a Culture Lab event in October 2015. And here's what Nisa said. Inclusivity means innovation. The more inclusive you are, the more debates you can have, the less hierarchy you have, the faster it is to recover from failure. If you say everyone should talk like me, look like me, be like me, have the same background as me, I don't think it would work well for companies. Having more diversity leads to more innovation. And, I think it's fundamental, especially I would say right now in a post-COVID scenario where everyone is trying to come up with products or services that are innovative, that are able to respond further. How can you think on your feet and how can you be more innovative if everyone around you is the same, right? So I think it's imperative now. While LGBTQ or any aspect of diversity earlier might have been the cherry on the cake, right now it is the whole cake. So that's the argument I make in terms of innovation. Certainly in terms of millennials, Gen Z, younger employees, employees really value what you stand for as an organization, whether it's caring for the environment, what you think of human rights, how you treat your people. So if you want to attract the best talent, you have to be inclusive right now. And there's interesting data that says that about 65% of LGBTQ employees, this is from a 2016 survey by Mingle, look at a company's HR policies as a major factor before joining a company. And I would say that it's an equally high amount for straight employees as well. They value LGBTQ inclusive companies, right? Juliet Burke's 2016 research also shows that organizations that have more inclusive cultures are 8x more likely to achieve better business outcomes than those who don't. So I make this case very broadly. Underlying all of this is a fundamental that being inclusive is a decent thing to do, but it's truly win-win, right? It makes you more money, makes you more innovative, attracts talent. There's no reason why you shouldn't be. I look at all the changes that are taking place, whether through cinema, whether through books, politics. So many different states in India are LGBTQ affirmative, whether it's Tamil Nadu, whether it's Chhattisgarh, whether it's Kerala, whether it's Maharashtra, which just started a transgender welfare board. At a national level, we've just had a National Trans Welfare Board as well. The law on so many fronts, progress is going to be made. Schools and colleges, whether it's a TIS, which has an all-gender hostel, whether it's a school like Tagore International in Delhi, where the students have created a Breaking Barriers LGBTQ inclusive club, and so many other schools like this, right? Where there's all the incredible intersectional queer movements that are happening all across, whether it is Queer Muslim Project, Dalit Queer Project, spaces like Pink List, incredible regional organizations, Raipur Pride, Ya All in Manipur, right? Great Queerabad and Ahmedabad. Incredible stuff is coming up all around us. And I kind of look at all of this and say that we're already living in the beginnings of a queer inclusive India, which I lovingly call Queeristan. And I say that now the onus is on all of us to imagine this better and to co-create it as well. As I hope that at the end of this talk, both you will believe that being inclusive is fundamentally win-win, but also that you are touched and you understand that when you are inclusive, how you can really change people's lives, right? My argument, as I've said so far already, is that it's a no-brainer. Besides, being inclusive is very much part of Indian culture. We have a rich history and we have an incredible amount of diversity in our past as well, with regard to what we call ourselves. In fact, what is alien is homophobia. It's something that the British brought to India and they went away 70 years ago. 377 has gone away. I think it's time homophobia also goes away because Indian values are inclusivity. I spoke earlier about family. It's all about loving your children. And I think this idea of family and acceptance, if we take forward into the workplace, it's going to be very crucial. In our workplaces, which is why I'm so happy to be talking at the Great Place to Work Summit, right? Our workplaces are often crucibles of identity formation for all of us, beyond our homes and schools or colleges, right? I firmly believe if we can change our workplaces, we can change our entire society. A great place to work is an inclusive place to work. And I think that's the message that we have to take home. So how do we create this inclusive place to work? All of you who are attending, if you're working in a company, if you're in HR, remember who are the people who are working in our companies, right? It's essentially a bunch of us who've spent our whole life in giving exam after exam, 10th standard, 12th standard, JEEs, MBA entrance. By the time we reach the workplace, we know how to give exams, but we've spent very little time in exploring who we are, what matters to us, our own desires, so many other things. So our office in that sense becomes that enabling environment where we can articulate who we are. And if you can create that great place to work where employees are encouraged to flourish and explore different aspects of their identity, I think you're doing great service. You're creating incredibly loyal and productive employees. So it's truly win-win. If you're listening to this, if you happen to be queer, I want you to remember that you are not alone. There are so many incredible hundreds and thousands, right? 4 to 10% of any population happens to be LGBTQ. And, right now in India, every town, every city, there are so many organizations. So just reach out. And if you happen to be straight, you really need to be an ally and stand up, speak up, and show up for your LGBTQ colleagues and customers, right? I think it's very, very important because LGBTQ people, we can't fight for our rights by ourselves. We need you as allies. In fact, some of the greatest ecosystem builders in our country, even within the corporate space, have been allies. Take Srini, for example, who is one of the co-founders of Pride Circle, which does job fairs for LGBTQ individuals, or my own boss, Nisa, for example, or Shubha Chacko, who runs Solidarity Foundation, which does incredible work for trans individuals, all happen to be straight. So many D&I leaders happen to be straight, like Madhumita Venkatraman, who was heading D&I at Coke, and so on, right? They've just recognized that inclusion is very, very important. And as they're working on gender and other manifestations of other pillars of D&I, LGBT also becomes an important pillar because they recognize the links between these. And truly there are links, right? Because if we look, what are all of us trying to do? We're all trying to create a more equal world. So the struggle for queer rights is very connected with the anti-caste movement, or with students' rights, or with feminism, or with climate change and the urge to create a better planet for all of us, or with Black Lives Matter, so many social justice movements all around the world. And I think it's time that we in corporate India understand this and build these bridges of solidarity and love and work towards creating a more inclusive and a more equal new normal. For those who are thinking, what can I do right now? The thing is, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The ecosystem has already been built all around you. So there's multiple job fairs taking place. I just told you there are incredible startup initiatives like Periphery, which are placing queer people. Periphery places transgender people in any organization. More and more companies across are becoming LGBTQ inclusive. In terms of what you can specifically do, you need to start out with a comprehensive suite of policies, because right from the basic, partnership benefits, non-discrimination, widen your POSH policy to include all genders, and gender reaffirmation surgery, which is now becoming quite standard for most companies, right? Which means if any employee wants to transition, you will pay for their transition and you will pay an annual cost for hormones. This won't go out of your own pocket mostly. Your insurer will cover it, so you can just work with your insurer. So having the right policies in place is key. Working and sensitizing your existing employees is very important, so that it's not that when LGBTQ people will come, they are already in your organization, right? You want to create an atmosphere where they are comfortable enough to share who they are, or they're comfortable enough to take the benefits. And you want to attract more different new LGBTQ people into your organization as well, right? So you have to sensitize your existing employees. You have to build this infrastructure, whether it's all gender washrooms and so on. You have to actively hire. You have to go out, work with community organizations and actively hire. Otherwise, you will be in a place where you'll have the best policies on paper, but you won't have people availing of these because you're not reaching out and actively hiring. There's many things you can do to actively hire, including things like signaling, which is on every profile. You can just put a small rainbow outline, etc. So you're indicating to LGBTQ potential viewers that, I am an LGBTQ friendly company. Signaling works really well. You can support a lot of queer organizations. I told you earlier about how there's an ecosystem being built. A lot of these NGOs and community organizations would really need your support. And there are examples of so many good companies. Bank of America did something with Periphery. ANZ did something, where a lot of companies go out and support these community efforts. And in this process, they realize that because of their work, a lot of talent gets attracted to these companies as well, right? So go out and support the queer ecosystem. Support these NGOs, support cultural festivals. There's a lot that you can do. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in our country, whether it's in terms of the law or so many other things. 377 going away in 2018 doesn't mean that our LGBTQ citizens have got equality. It just means that we are decriminalized. But between the decriminalization to true equality, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I firmly believe that companies, the workplaces can be that useful crucible of the change that can then percolate outwards into people's homes, into governments, national and state governments, and into the wider society at large. So for all of you who are watching and witnessing this seminar, I think one should start not with an engineering mindset these days, but with a design thinking mindset. Like engineering mindset means make all the plans, keep everything ready, plan for like 6 months, 2 years, 3 years until everything is perfect. But I would say start with a design thinking mindset, saying this is a direction we want to go in, and we're going to go in this direction and iterate along the way. Work with community organizations, right? They will help you. So if you want to hire more LGBTQ people, work with LGBTQ organizations in your city. They will often help you in placements and in sensitization and so many other things, right? I would say it's very important to start right at the top. We are still very hierarchical in India. So if the CEO or if the MD, your senior leadership, if it indicates that LGBTQ inclusion is something that they're committing to, then I think it's going to be very, very easy for people down the line to support. So start at the top, work with the existing infrastructure, actively hire queer people. If you hire us into your organizations, we will tell you what we need. So just work with the community. And whatever you are doing, recognize that it is for your benefit. When you are hiring queer people, you are not doing us a favor. You are doing yourself a favor because you are getting the talent, you are getting the money, you are getting it all, right? So the attitude should be one of, it's truly win-win. It shouldn't be one of CSR or benevolence. It should really be one in which, the organization is benefiting. So I think, just get started.
Are these inclusion efforts for LGBTQ different from inclusion efforts that we've seen so far? Is there something specific that we need to do in this inclusion journey that is not something that we have been doing so far?
I think every pillar of inclusion has its unique needs, for example, right? So in gender, for example, in terms of the policies, right? You will make, you will think of things like maternity benefits and things like that, which are actually quite the norm now. But, some years ago, they weren't. Likewise with PWD, you have to have software in place. You have to have the physical infrastructure in place, work with organizations as well and things like that, right? So with LGBTQ also with regard to, say, with trans employees, when you are hiring trans people, you will have to sensitize your HR department to understand that there are specific circumstances of trans people. For example, someone might have a 10th standard school leaving certificate in one gender and a graduation certificate in another gender because that person has transitioned. So you have to work with your HR department not to question or not to say, what is this, but to understand that there are specific needs. Kochi Metro did this quite well. They went on this learning journey because first when they hired a whole bunch of trans people, the trans people left, not because the job was bad, but because they were not able to provide, they were not able to get housing. And the commute was very difficult to the job. So Kochi Metro then went back and helped and worked with its trans employees and helped them with housing and things like that, right? So I think with every aspect of inclusion, whichever a pillar you're looking at, you will have to look at the specific needs. The correct approach in this is that you are not going out of your way. You are just doing what is necessary. And what you are getting in return is so much more than what you are putting in everything. I have one thing to say, that there is always someone, whenever you suggest any new idea at a meeting, who likes to play devil's advocate. It will always be someone who is scared of change, who wants the status quo to continue. You must tell this person who likes playing devil's advocate, please don't. Because in any meeting, any good idea, how many ideas have been lost at the altar of this devil's advocacy, right? So I just think the right approach should be that this is something that we need to do for our own benefit. We are going to do it. We are going to work in whichever manifestation of inclusion. I mean, we should ideally be working in all, right? And not think of it as linear. So many companies I talk to also say, let's do gender first, fill PWD, LGBTQ. And of course, no one wants to talk about caste or any of the other manifestations. And my question is why? Why have this linear hierarchy of what is better for you now? And I mean, the truth is we want to create a more inclusive world for everyone. So we should be looking at all aspects, right? All the time. So thank you so much to all of you once again for giving me the chance to actually share my thoughts with you. I'm really, really, really very grateful. And I hope that you have an incredible rest of the conference.
So thank you so much, Parmesh, for your insights. And I would like you to stay back for the Q&A session after Argo's speech.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Our next speaker for the session is Mr. Argo Sen. Mr. Argo Sen is the head of Commercial Banking India for the Natwest Group, erstwhile RBS. Argo has over 25 years of experience in the banking industry and is responsible for leading a team of 1,800 colleagues, supporting both operations and front office. Argo is also the sponsor for the Management Associate Program, Banking Analyst Proposition, and LGBTQ for Natwest in India. Argo loves reading, and I'm going to ask him what his current read is. His house is filled with books, He has two daughters and is also a pet parent to Mojo, a golden retriever. I now invite Argo to share his thoughts on our topic of the day. Over to you, Argo.
Hi, I'm Orko Sen. I run commercial banking in Natwest Group in India. As Maithili just mentioned, we are now calling ourselves or renamed ourselves Natwest Group instead of RBS. I was picked up to be the sponsor for the LGBT initiatives within the company around a year and a half back. I was a little surprised because I have no special knowledge in the space. I'd never worked in the space before. But I said, fine, let me take it on as a challenge. And when I started working with the volunteers within the organization, what I found was a group of very, very committed, enthusiastic, energetic volunteers who are doing a lot of things. But I felt that without too much focus, without having clarity on where are we trying to go. So as a first step, what I did was I organized a set of sessions or meetings with the volunteers to allow them to discuss and decide, what are the goals that we want to set ourselves. The vision for NatWest Group is to be an organization that has inclusion integrated into its core and visibly supports the LGBT community. Now, getting there is going to be a multi-year journey, but we need to take one step at a time. And what I wanted was that we set very clear goals for our first few steps. So what the group came up with on their own as our initial goals or our initial focus is two things. One is to create a safe and inclusive working environment for LGBT colleagues within the company. And the second is to become an employer of choice for the LGBT community. So we should be known widely on campuses, amongst the community as really a great place to work if you are LGBT. So we picked these two as our initial focus areas, and these are still our focus areas. And then we use these to relook at all the things that we're doing. And as I said, there was a lot of activity, people attending corporate events, talk shows, parades, and we realized that many of them don't actually contribute towards these two goals. So we actually really stopped doing a lot of activity which was not helping us achieve these goals and refocused our efforts. So on making the first goal, on making NatWest a more inclusive, diversity-friendly environment, we did a number of things. First of all, we reviewed all our policies. We wrote all our policies. I would say that's relatively easy to do for most companies. I mean, of course, there will be some internal bureaucracy, but it's something that can be tackled, and we have done it, and all our policies are LGBT-friendly. But I just want to be clear that rewriting policies on its own does not change the culture environment within the company. So the second thing we did is that the team pulled together a Mythbuster pack, a very simple Mythbuster pack, which is actually a fantastic pack. And then we have been running sessions using this pack, throughout the company at every level. So I have myself run it for leadership teams. The volunteers, our volunteers have run it at different levels for managers, for clerical staff. We have even run it for security guards, because when you enter our office, your first point of contact is a security guard. And how a security guard treats you when you enter sets your impression of the company, of what's your view of what is NatWest like. And it was actually warmly welcomed by the security guards. They had a lot of questions. They were enthusiastic, and I was really, really pleasantly surprised. But that is something we have done. We've also rolled out gender-neutral toilets, signage. So we continue to engage with all employees in every possible way. We have been organizing talks. We have done drives to sign up allies and significantly increase the number of allies. We also have uh, an RView survey, which happens every year, sometimes twice a year. And there are questions on LGBT and diversity within the survey. And we are very focused on improving the scores in that area. One is, I mentioned that we do a RView survey every year, and there are questions on diversity and how inclusive the company feels. Almost 10% of our population chooses not to disclose their sexual orientation. But that's a big number. And when we view their scores, and it's a completely anonymous survey, so we don't know who they are, but we are able to get a cut of what do they think of the company. And their engagement scores are significantly lower than the general population. We have, as a company, very high engagement scores in our view. And that's a worry. So it means that while, this Mythbuster Pack, change in policies, etc., is just a start. And there's a lot more work which needs to be done. That's why we have gone on this drive to sign up more allies, to have more frequent conversations on the shop floor, discussions on the shop floor. So I think that is an area of focus. We truly want Natwest to feel a warm, inclusive, working environment. And as a leader, we believe, we are there. But then when you get a survey and you see this and you realize that maybe not everywhere in the company, maybe not at every level, and there's still more work to be done. So that is something that we want to work on. The other is, I do want to figure out how do we reach out to the community better. So if we take 10% as a guideline, for example, and we go to an MBA campus, and people don't, in India today, most people still don't disclose. But how do we connect with the LGBT community on a campus and say, look, please come and attend our pre-placement talk? How do we get the message through? Because there are hundreds of companies on campus, during placement week. How do we cut through and connect with the community and say, we encourage you to join us. We are truly, a safe and inclusive place to work. So that's something we are still thinking about. I mean, I don't have an answer, but it's something I'm quite passionate about working on. I also run a number of the grad programs within Natwest, as you have mentioned, and I think, personally, I feel you get your hiring right, everything else gets taken care of. So how do we become known as really the best place to work if you're LGBT? That's something that we are still thinking and discussing. So that's on the first goal, number of things that we have been doing to make Natwest, LGBT friendly. Same-sex partner medical benefits, all gender orientation, inclusive training sessions, parental leave policies for adoption and surrogacy, even changes to the pre-employment screening policy and process, number of different things. On the second part, which is to become known within the community, as a great place to work, as a employer of choice for LGBT. It's a vast space, and we had a lot of discussion on where should we start, and we actually felt that, and personally, that's also the conclusion I came to, is that the community which is really struggles the most is the transgender community. From a very early age, they face a lot of struggle. And it's very difficult for them to integrate into the mainstream, get a proper job. So we decided to focus our efforts on this space. So we pulled together an internship program called Transcend for the transgender community, and we ran it last year. Its feedback was fantastic. We're going to run it again this year. The idea is to take on interns from the transgender community, take them on for anywhere from 3 to 6 months as interns. That first of all gives them stability, and certain income for a period of time. The objective of the program is to equip them to get a job. Many of them have never seen a corporate environment. They have never received any coaching or advice, support on communication skills, even basic skills like using Word, Excel, PowerPoint. That's what we tried to achieve through the program. It was actually very successful because all our interns, after completing the internship with us, have got good jobs on their own externally. And one of them actually has come back, and we have hired her full-time within Natwest. We plan to continue running this internship program every year, and it's got delayed this year because of COVID, but it's going to start again very soon. We learned a lot. I mean, I talked about changes in our pre-employment screening process. A lot of those learnings came out of trying to onboard transgender interns, which was fed back into our, employment screening process. What else are we doing on the hiring or becoming employer of choice? We go to a lot of campuses at every level. We go to plain graduate colleges in cities. We go to engineering colleges for our IT technology teams. We go to MBA campuses. So in all our campus hiring, we have amended our sort of pitch book or pre-placement talk to stress on how diversity friendly we are, how welcoming we are of LGBT candidates. I hope that's helped because, as a policy, if you don't want to disclose, we don't ask. But I do feel it has started to change the way we are seen on campus. And that's something where we are very pleased about. So the work continues. As I said, this is going to be a journey, a long journey. And I think we've taken possibly just baby steps. But it's been quite an exciting 18 months. And I think we have now driven a real change within the company in terms of our culture and our thinking. And our volunteer group is all charged up about the progress we have made so far.
Thank you so much, Argo, for your insights and for beautifully highlighting the role of the leader in the inclusion journey today. I'm going to request you to stay back for the Q&A session, and I'm also going to ask Parmesh to join us, and we'll slowly have questions come in from the audiences as well. So do stay back. Thank you so much once again. We will now move on to our Q&A section where we'll be taking audience questions. I invite both Parmesh and Argo to join us. I request the audience members to chat out their questions in the chat box, and we will address as many questions as time allows, but we are very, very curious to hear from you all as to what your insights have been and what are some of the thoughts that are consuming you all today. So please do share in the chat box, and while the questions are coming in, I have a couple of questions to ask both Argo and Parmesh.